After George Floyd died in Minneapolis last May, America changed, and it changed very fast. We were told we needed to reckon with something called systemic racism. The Democratic National Committee, you heard that African Americans are routinely murdered by the police. All of it was a lie. Wilfred Riley is a social scientist. He's a professor, and he's studied the data on this. He's got a new book called The Hate Crime Hoax. We had an amazing conversation with Wilfred Riley. If you've never heard of him, watch this. What are some of the things that you believe are true that are not permitted in polite conversation right now?
Well, the book Taboo looks at what you could call cancel culture today, and what many people do call cancel culture, which is this kind of idea that there's certain things that may be true, that may even have very intense explanatory value, that you're not supposed to discuss in polite society. And the problem here is if you can't discuss the possible explanations for things, the very likely explanations for things in some cases, you end up having a non-productive conversation where things that aren't very relevant, sexism comes to mind in many situations, end up being labeled the total cause of everything that we're seeing. But I mean, so the first chapter of the book looks at the Black Lives Matter movement. I openly say I'm a black man, proud one, I'm an academic. I have some sympathy toward the underlying goals of the movement, racial equality and so on. But I point out that many of the things they say are objectively not true. If you look at the claim that there's a very large number of murders, if you will, of African-American men by police, that turns out simply not to be true. The total number of unarmed African-American males killed, in genuinely disputed, potentially controversial shootings by police last year was, if I have the number correct, 13. The total number of unarmed people, including the very large Caucasian and Hispanic majority we rarely talk about, that number was under 100. Full number of police shootings all in was under 1,000, and that included people that were attacking the officer with a pistol or another firearm, a knife, a vehicle used as a weapon. So that argument simply didn't stand up. There wasn't a gigantic black-white discrepancy, certainly if you adjust for crime rate. And again, the total number of these cases for all groups combined was 100 or less. So those were the facts. And I went on from there into interracial crime in general. And I think that this is something that the media on all political sides really emphasizes because, failure of masculinity, if you will, or planes crashing out of the sky, or animal attacks, it's one of those things that just terrifies people. So we see a lot of stories about, warriors of the other race sort of attacking people. It's unprovoked, it's ugly. It turns out this very rarely happens. There is an annual document that summarizes kind of the victim-reported crime in the USA that we call the Bureau of Justice Statistics Report, the BJS report.
Yeah.
And out of really, 12 to 20 million crimes in a typical year, we have a problem with crime in this country. Generally, about 600,000 of those are going to be interracial violent crimes that involve either, a black perp and a white victim, or a white perp and a black victim. So it's a tiny percentage, it's around 5%. And the even more politically incorrect part of that would be those numbers in general are also about 80% black on white. Now, you have to understand there are 5 times as many white people as black people. Just to begin the analysis, the black crime rate is still a bit disproportionate. But the actual figures don't give really support to anyone's theories of paranoia. This is 5% of the crimes. It doesn't cut in the direction that the mainstream media reports almost every time if we're going to talk about this sort of fringe topic at all. So I make this point. It's saying that there's an epidemic of white cops or of white people attacking black people. We can all call out cases where that indeed did occur or may have occurred, such as the George Floyd situation. Right. But that's simply not the reality of the country, and presenting it as though it is hurts race relations pretty seriously.